Hello everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we are back with Filecoin, and if you watched the last video, you'll know that we spoke about this chance that we could break above this line. My initial theory a few months ago was that we'd spend more time at this low as we got closer to the halving, and that was mainly based off of historical performance from Filecoin. So last cycle, Filecoin spent basically all the way up until the halving at this $3 level, and we saw we even returned to this level. So for me, I was expecting a fourth drop back down. Potentially here was kind of when I was expecting it, and that I thought that would bring us perfectly in line with a few weeks before the halving, trace back to this low. Obviously that hasn't happened. We only came back down 3 times, and we can sort of see these colored circles that I've drawn in here that match up to the current cycle of the circles, basically the same moves. But you will have also noticed a few other new things popping up here, and that is of course the orange circles, this purple line here that lines up here, which is most likely the resistance that we will come to where Filecoin could potentially see a bit of a pullback, and of course these sort of percentage move measurements that we got last cycle and comparing them to this current cycle. So getting straight into it, what I want to talk about is these arrows first of all and what they measure. Now if we take a look at last cycle, we can basically see that this measures from this $3.15 level, this key level that Filecoin has always returned to during the bear markets, and it measures where it put in its local support after its final move. So when it bounced up from this range for the last time, it bounced up about 43%, setting the next support, and then from there it made a move of 150 give or take, where it also set the next support. So you can see we're measuring from basically support to support, support to support. And if we kind of zoom out, we can see a similar thing happening today, where we're measuring from this support again to where we set in a low here, where this orange circle marks this middle orange circle, and then we're measuring again from a support up to potentially the next support. And where am I pulling this number from? Well, there's actually 2 places. There's this guy here, which is 150% move give or take, and there's this guy here, which is also another 150% move. And this is going to be the kind of 2 hypotheses that I present to you in this video. And what it basically boils down to is, are we going to see sort of these 3 arrows play out, where we have our initial green like we've had here, a purple like we've had here, and then another purple on top of this, potentially bringing us sort of above the $30 mark? Or because of how this pattern here has played out, which is almost identical in terms of time, percentage moves, weeks red, weeks green, almost identical to what we saw a couple months back. Is it just that we skipped this leg up here because obviously we didn't get a strong move into this orange? We can see first time we moved from this support, it was kind of, the peak was at our first orange move here. Here obviously our first orange move was at our $3 bear cycle price. Have we skipped that? And this move here is basically equivalent to what we're seeing now, and potentially we could see much lower returns if Filecoin is going to play out how it did last bull run, where even if we get the same moves now afterwards, we'd be missing out on this 150% move. It's not anything too important, but just something to think about. Again, I think it's important that we obviously compare these 2 times to each other because they are so very similar. Now currently we have seen things basically happen earlier, and you could almost kind of translate this chart to the left a bit, and you'd probably see a very similar thing play out over the long term. But of course, we're kind of just gonna have to wait and see. Nobody can predict the future. What is interesting enough is after this first move, we came to a resistance at this sort of $12.75 level. And if we bring this guy down a small bit just to the 144 level, we could potentially set a support here. If I just bring this down a tiny bit as well, we could potentially see a support here and also a resistance here, a similar kind of thing where we had this small range that we oscillated in until Filecoin broke out. And again, this was kind of in contention because this move could have already played out a long time ago, potentially, if it is going to follow how it played out the last cycle to a degree. Now we could just see the same move play out again. We could just have this orange basically start here once it sets a support after a few weeks, and then rocket up and basically see the same thing happen again. I mean, it would basically be the exact same level that Filecoin did this at the last cycle. The last cycle it was $10.50 where we set this support. Filecoin is now at $10.64. it's very possible that we find a support here and then bounce up from it, and we see another thing like this play out. Realistically, I think Filecoin has got a lot left in the tank, definitely over the long run. Over the next year, I think it will probably perform very well for sure. And again, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but the potential upside is huge for Filecoin. Now there's a good chance we don't return to these all-time highs of like $220, $230, but with all the sort of hype and press it's been getting over the last few months, and again, just to remind you, we've seen something like a 300% move, more or less bang on a 300% move in the last 4 months, 4 or 5 months. I mean, if it keeps up that pace, you're going to be looking very nice. But again, nothing's guaranteed in crypto, especially with these altcoins. If we turn on the bull market support band, we can see that, again, what led up to this point is very similar, where we had very strong downward trends, basically below the bull market support band this whole time. And leading up to the halving, we saw a bit of a revival, followed by a bit of a plateau, a bit of a kind of steady off, which we kind of saw here, a bit more of a stronger plateau, followed by a bit more of a revival. So again, things are changing up a bit, but this move is somewhat comparable to here. It's not as steep of an incline, but again, if we get a few more weeks of this kind of movement where Filecoin puts in a 100% move over a 150% move over a month, I'm sure this bull market support band will become much more vertical, which is ultimately what we kind of hope for, as long as vertical traveling up, not vertical traveling down. But really, that's all I kind of have to say about Filecoin. More of a checkup rather than a proper breakdown and analysis. So moving into the Bitcoin pair, again, always take a look at the Bitcoin pair when we're looking at altcoins. I think they tell a very important story. And with Filecoin, we can see that basically since its inception, it's kind of played out very similarly. We can see from this white to this purple, these lines indicate years, by the way, and we're folding them into the 4-year cycle. So of course, 2019 line here obviously matches up with the 2023 line. The 2020 line obviously matches up with the 2024 line, so on. And we can see that, when Filecoin launched from the 2018 sort of year to the 2020 year, Filecoin bled on its Bitcoin pair. We saw a very similar thing from 2022 to 2024. Filecoin just bled basically all the way down. But now if we zoom in, we can see we're getting a bit of a revival. We've had a double top here, and we've basically pushed above the previous sort of close, which is a bullish sign. Now we have had a bit of a retracement, but I don't think that's really a nail in the coffin or anything. I think it's just the market being the market. And we can see that what happened back in 2020, again, 4 years back, the 4-year cycle, we can see that this is when Filecoin really started to rally, and we can see we even had this sort of green support here. Now this was at 4,000 Satoshis, 3,800 Satoshis at the time, and Filecoin kept going back here, but kind of bouncing off it each time until it eventually broke out into its bull run. We can see that we've kind of set another green support here. Now it's at a much lower price, 1,000 Satoshis, so a quarter of what it was. Ultimately Filecoin has bled and lost more value against Bitcoin over the long run, but we're still seeing things play out very similarly, where late 2019 we kind of came down to this low, and then if you come down to October, September time again of 2023, we see the same thing. So even in terms of time frames and how things are playing out over the long term, it is pretty similar. And again, we saw leading up to the halving a lot of volatile movement, a lot of strong moves up and down. We're not close enough yet to the halving to say what it will be like beforehand, but we've definitely seen volatile movements, maybe not as volatile as here, but Filecoin was also a totally different coin back then, a totally different market cap, liquidity, etc. Totally different market. But ultimately what we did see is once the halving came along, which is this orange line here, Filecoin trended up, and we can see that it made a 500% move sort of from this green to not even the all-time high, but to a strong high, I would say, and that was 22,000 Satoshis. So if we kind of take a 500% move again from where we last touched this green, it does put us in line with kind of where I said Filecoin will probably go a long time ago in my videos, and I've stuck to that. I think this resistance here that Filecoin put in at the start of the bull run will be very hard for it to break above on its Bitcoin pair. I think Bitcoin's due a strong bull run. I think it's going to be hard for a lot of altcoins to vastly outperform it, and now Filecoin could of course be the exception. But I think a 5x move on Bitcoin, if Bitcoin moves up to 2-3x this cycle, that's Filecoin having to move up 15x. It's definitely possible. We can definitely have strong wicks above. I think realistically though, you're not going to spend much time above this 6,000 Satoshi level. That is just me, of course, but I think this resistance will be too strong. If we break above, I'll be very happy. And sorry, I should have said this at the start of the video, but I do hold Filecoin. So if we do rocket above Bitcoin, I'll be celebrating with you. But me personally, I would be slightly pessimistic of us going well above. But hey, you know, it's crypto. Anything can happen. We also look at the, sort of the time frame and where Filecoin last touched the low, where it last sort of put in the low before moving up. We can see it took 22 weeks for it to get to this high. If we move 22 weeks from this low that we came to last time, now there's no guarantee that this is the last time we touch this green. We were kind of basically touching it literally up until the halving week in a way. But I've just taken it from here for simplicity's sake. They're also a similar time frame in terms of how long before they happened before the halving. But we can see it would basically put us in at sometime mid-July for Filecoin to kind of be at its peak or peaking on its Bitcoin pair. And that's if it's going to, again, play out in a similar way, which there's no guarantee of. It doesn't have to play out in a similar way at all. It's just interesting to compare the previous cycle to the current. So, you know, all potentials, all possibilities, none of them guarantees. Just always remember that, especially, you know, when you're on other channels as well. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And most likely if they're hyping something up to you, it's so that you can buy their bags, basically. But anyway, that about wraps up this video. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, that's totally fine too. Comment down below what alt you want next, or if there's something I missed in this video. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Take care and peace.